Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. I have about 8:25. We'll go ahead and get started right at 8:30 to make sure we get out of here on time and provide time for you all to ask any questions. But you should be able to see my screen. The bit.ly for the presentation is there as well. If you have any questions, you can put those in the questions section of your control panel, and I will answer those as I go or at the end of the session, depending on where it fits in to the presentation. So we'll get started in just a few minutes. I'm going to mute myself. But again, if you have any questions, please put those in the questions tab of your control panel, and I will answer those as we go. All right, well, I have 8:30, and I will go ahead and get started. Just to give you guys a heads up, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the DLMI wiki, and I'll show you where as we go through the presentation. Again, my name is Nathan Craver. I work for the Department of Public Instruction for the Digital Teaching and Learning Division. I do data assessment and continuous improvement, as well as tech and infrastructure support for that division. And one of those roles is to manage the DLMI. I'm sure if you're familiar with the DLMI, you've probably gotten an email from me at some point. If you're new to this, then I am one of the points of contact for the DLMI. If you have any issues with it or questions, you can email me and I'll provide some contact information for other routes for help as well. But if you'd like to follow along, I will be sharing my screen, and then the presentation will be here as well for you if you'd like to follow. But again, we're just at this bit.ly. We're going to go through the school level. This webinar is intended for folks who are new to the DLMI. So if you're someone who's been doing it for years, this is really just intended for folks that are new to the system to kind of give a once over of what's in there, what it looks like, and just to support new folks in their role. And again, for those that are just coming on, if you have any questions, please put those in the questions tab and I'll answer them as we go. But feel free to join along as we click through the presentation. So just to get started on this webinar, I just wanted to make sure that you had all of the links to the different areas of things that you might need. So for the data collection system itself, that's just schools.nc.gov/NCDLMI. And then we also have a reporting tool, and the reporting tool provides all of the data that's input into the system, provided it turns it around for folks to look at by question. So if you're interested to see, for example, how many media coordinators in the state of North Carolina are on fixed versus flex schedules, you can go to that reporting tool link, go to that question in the question inquiry section, and look at that type of stuff there. Just as a note, everything in the DLMI is considered public information. Somebody could, a newspaper or a stakeholder in your district could email the school or email the district and say, I want all of this information from your school. And so as a way to sort of provide a resource for you all, if you're interested in, or if you ever were to get a request like that, you can just give them that link and say, here you go, here's all the data for the state of North Carolina, and it's something you would save you some time with. We also have a user's guide, and we'll talk more about that as we go through, and then we also have a wiki that you can click on for additional support as well. So all of those links are here. If you bookmark this presentation or bookmark each of these four, these will be all the things that you'll need for the DLMI as you go through. I will say that, as many of you probably are aware, Wikispaces is going away. The company is basically closing its doors, so we are looking for a new location at DPI. We have plans underway to move and migrate this information, and when that's finalized, we'll update this presentation with where it goes, as well as communicate out to the field about where we're housing all of that information. So each of those are links there for you. So if you're new to the digital learning media inventory, or this is your first time filling it out, just as a heads up, it is aligned to the digital learning progress rubric. It is aligned to the school and charter and LEA versions. There's 3 different versions of the rubric. Many of you are probably aware that we've released an online progress rubric this year, and it's in the same system as the DLMI, but these are aligned, and the intent was that the data collected in the digital learning and media inventory could help schools and charters and districts with data for filling out the progress rubric. So we tried to align it to the questions in the rubric and streamline those questions. At one time, there were over 500 questions in the digital learning and media inventory. We're down to right at 100, about 50, it's about 60 at the school level and about 40 at the district level. I said that backwards. It's about 40 at the school level and about 60 at the district level. So you'll see when we go through that we've streamlined it, we've updated it, But the idea here is that we're collecting data and then trying to turn that around to schools to provide LEA charters and schools with reports so that you all can make decisions around planning and budgets. And then we also collect data for the school report card. It also goes on state planning documents like the school boards, the state school board's strategic plan. We collect data for that. And we also use it for budget making at the state level and cooperative purchasing decisions as well. For folks that are just joining us, I'm putting the bit.ly in the chat link to follow along with the presentation. And if you have any questions as we go, feel free to put those in the questions tab. And I see that I logged in as Susan McKinney. For those of you that are on the line, I am not Susan. My name is Nathan. So anyway, but if you have any questions specifically for me that you don't want shared out to the group, you can direct those to Susan's name, and I will see those from here. So the next thing I wanted to show you was our wiki space. And I'm going to not close out, but jump out of the presentation here for just a second. And when you go to this wiki, one of the things that you'll see is this will take you to this page. And you can see these 6 tabs that we have here across the top. One of the most important tabs on this wiki is this requesting access. For you folks that are school level folks that are interested or are going to be responsible for inputting the data into the system, this will be a page that you will want to keep handy because we require a principal sign off since it is a school report card data component. We do require principals to sign off. So principals don't use this system very often. They don't log in except when they have to sign off. It tends to be so because we use the NCID system and NCID passwords reset every 90 days as indicated by the last bullet. Quite often we find that the principal's username has been locked out or their password needs to be reset because they sign off at the end of the year, and then this is the only system that's left that's really using NCID. So this is a page that I copy and paste and send out a lot to folks. But this is how you get access. If you don't currently have access, you'll need your NCID. And on this page, there's a link that you can click through. And you can just jump into either of those and find out who your person in your district is or at your charter school who can reset that password. If that person's not there because it hasn't been updated since they've retired or moved on, there's the phone numbers right at the top of these links that you can call the state and reset those. Unfortunately, I don't have access to reset NCIDs. I just can manipulate the DLMI users. I can't do the NCIDs. We are planning to migrate over to the Ed Cloud within the next year. So hopefully this page will get updated soon and make life a lot easier for everybody. But these are just the roles here. If you are a school user who is responsible for typing in any of the data or inputting any data, you need the school administrator role. And then you should have a school principal person as well. School inquiry, we don't have a lot of those folks who need this, but sometimes schools ask for an assistant principal or someone to have an inquiry only where they can log in and see it, but they don't have any access to change the data. For charter schools, we have a charter school administrator, and then same role with charter school inquiry only. If you have a principal in your, whatever your person in charge of your school is at the charter school, they can either be a charter school administrator or a principal and have that sign-off capability. If I know a lot of cases we have multiple schools, we're split between schools. I'm an ITF and I've got to fill this out for, 2 schools, or I've got a, media coordinator split between a couple schools. There are 2 ways to accomplish that. If you're split between schools, you can either have 2 NCIDs that are associated with each school, or if your district administrator feels comfortable with this, then you can apply to be an LEA administrator, which would give you access to multiple schools at the same time. But other things that are on this wiki And if you ever forget this wiki or can't find it, if you just Google DLMI wiki, it's the first thing that comes up. But when you click on this, you can look through and you'll see this next thing in here is tutorials. All of the webinars that we host will be posted on this page. I've got the one from yesterday that I'm still working on getting uploaded, but that one will be up today, and this one should be up by this afternoon as well. But those recordings will be here if you ever need to come back and listen to it again. And then you'll see the other tabs. We have resources. These are just some links. One of the things that I mentioned in the link earlier was the user's guide. So I want to just quickly show you what that is. When you click on the user's guide, it just takes you to a Google Doc basically, or a website. And you can see that each of the sections, so we're on the school section today. So when I go to the school section, it has a screenshot of the questions within the DLMI, and then any relevant text, frequently asked questions, things that we see are common errors are addressed in the text. But it's just a screenshot with directions for each of the questions. And I just recommend having this open if you're new to it, if you're filling it out for the first time, and you can go through and see this here as well. All right, so that's here. We also have frequently asked questions here. One of the things that come up frequently we add here. I also add them to the user's guide. So if you've got the user's guide open, then that's probably the most easiest way for you to get access to those frequently asked questions. We did update the DLMI in 2015. So it used to be called the Annual Media and Technology Report. So all the data that you would need prior to 2015 is on this tab. And then we have that link out to the reporting tool that I mentioned earlier. So now I'm going to jump back in just quickly to the presentation. You'll notice that the presentation, if you're clicking through, doesn't have a whole lot of slides to it, but the idea for today was that we were really going to spend some time in the system itself. So if you want to log in with me, or you can just watch your screen. Sure, I don't have it open again somewhere. So when you go to the screen, you're going to log in. On this home page, it should show you your username right here, and then what your account type is. If you are not a school administrator and you're trying to, or an LEA administrator, and you're trying to input data in for the school, that's incorrect. So we have a lot of folks that ask. This word administrator tends to throw folks for a loop for whatever reason. We tend to have, when our education brains think administrator means principal or director or something like that, but our data input brain should tell us that this is like a database administrator. And so for this system, an administrator means the person responsible for the data. So a lot of folks aren't comfortable asking for that role. So it should say, if you're responsible for the data, it should say school administrator or charter school administrator there as well. As you'll notice, the completion deadline is always June 30th, even if that falls on a Saturday. Then that's the deadline. I will tell you that the last 2 years that deadline has, we have turned it off at that deadline, but then reopened briefly for folks to get things either correct, or if we see we've added a new question that folks have misinterpreted or things like that, we do follow up with folks to follow to try to get it finished, since it does fill out the school report card. This just provides some information on how we got to be the DLMI instead of the AMTR, and then some links to different components of the pages there. So if you are a school user or a charter school administrator, if you are a school administrator and you work in a traditional district, then you should see the tab that says school up at the top, and the tab that says reports. If you are a charter school administrator, you should see the charter tab, you should see the reports, and then you will also see the charter profile tab. Since I'm a DPI administrator, I have all the tabs, and then based on your user role, depends on what tabs you should see. If you're an LEA person, you'll have LEA school, uploads, reports, and profile. So I'm just going to click on school For LEAs, or for charter schools and traditional schools, you are both required to fill out this section, and it is a one-for-one match. There is no difference at the school level on the rubric or on the DLMI. So I'm just going to pick a school that I know that isn't necessarily required to fill this out, and just kind of go through, and we're going to talk about what this looks like. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes going through just each of the sections with and highlight some of the things that come up as common questions, and just go through quickly and on what this system can do. So as you look over on the left, you'll notice there are three big sections: leadership, tech and infrastructure, and content and instruction, as well as a validation section, and then the principal sign-off. So if you look at this component here, what you see is over here on the left is your navigation feature, and you'll notice that the shared vision side is bolded. And so the section that you're in is bolded, and then the big section that you're in, so like shared vision, is under leadership. All of the components under leadership go to caps locks. That's just to help you know what section you're in. If I click down on school networks, you notice they all go back to lowercase, and these all change to caps, just to kind of help you navigate. When you go through this section, you'll notice that 101, and then it jumps to 103. We do know how to count, I promise, although sometimes I don't think I do. But when you go through this, you'll notice that 101 jumps to 103. That can mean one of two things. That can mean that a drop-down question, in this particular case, is there so that if you put a specific answer, then 102 pops up. So in this question, we're asking, does your school improvement plan integrate digital learning? So if you have digital learning strategies in your school improvement plan, you would put yes, and then a link to that. If it's in NC Star, you can provide the link that folks would use to get to the public version of your tool for NC Star. 103 is the same sort of process there. It's a drop-down menu as well. I'm going to hit Save Changes just so I can show you something real quick. You'll notice that that my shared vision went from red to black. Black means that you have a partially complete section. If I was to put in a web link here, and then hit Save Changes, you'll notice that that section turns to green. So when you've answered all of the questions that are required, your section will turn to green. And then I'm just going to fix this so that I don't have any answers in here for this school. And notice now that I've emptied that back out, it turns back to red. So each of these questions go through here. You'll notice in this particular question that you'll see that you're missing some numbers. That may mean that you are looking for an answer that would pop open if you type in something, or potentially that we've deleted a question. So when we go through here, we're asking for classroom teachers. Does your school have? The definition for classroom teacher that we use is anyone that is responsible for instruction of students. So if they are in the classroom with students, teaching students, then I would count them as a classroom teacher if they have students assigned to them. If their role is to work with adults and adults only, then I would not count them as a teacher. But I always recommend asking your principal or asking your human resource person how many teachers that you have, because we do know that some schools work with classroom teacher positions to provide ITFs or media coordinators or things like that. So I would always just ask your principal for that. We do use this number to create or to calculate things like how many computers per teacher and how many students per things like that, where we're using the teachers as a divisor. It is okay to put in, if you've got a half-time teacher, it is okay to put in 0.5 there. Someone who is split between schools, you can put in 0.25 if they have 4 schools, things like that. We ask the same thing about ITFs. with the license or without. So if they're certified or not, same for media coordinators. And then and then we ask for assistant positions. And so one of the things that's really important in this system is that when you're filling this out is that you are working with your person at the LEA level and that there's communication as you fill this out. Because one of the things that we really want to make sure is that we're not giving an inaccurate count of people because we know how important people are. And so we don't want to inflate those numbers or deflate those numbers, whichever the case may be, because we do use this data to advocate for positions in schools. So we want to make sure that this is accurate information. So when we ask for instructional tech facilitators, if you have an instructional tech facilitator at your district who is paid for out of district funds, reports to somebody at the district level, but is assigned to your school for half a day or however that works, they should be counted at the district level. If they're paid for out of a school budget code and they are 100% assigned to your school and they report to your principal, then they should be counted at the school level. And that works for the same thing in the assistants. If you have somebody who's paid for by the district but it's split between schools, it's paid for by the district and reports to the district should be counted at the district. Paid for by the school and reports to somebody at the school should be counted at the school level. So that's one of the things in personnel, but we do ask for positions here for each of those things. For sustainability, we ask about tech fees. When you check yes on this one, if you filled this out in the past. All right, so questions that came in, let me jump back a page before I jump on this. 2 questions came in from 2 different people with the same question. Yes, you should count art, music, and PE teachers. And technically, the state definition of teacher also includes school counselors oftentimes. So again, I would just work with my principal and say, ask him or her, how many teachers do you have in your school, and then count them there. But yes, art, music, and PE for sure. If they're split between schools, if they rotate between schools, then and you have them for 1 day a week, you can put in 0.2 for them there as well. So just if you've got 3 of those at 0.2. Then put that as well. Do classroom teachers have to be certified? Thinking of online facilitators. So yes, we are asking for certified teachers. If they are considered, if they are not if they're not certified, gosh, it depends on if they're being paid as a teacher, but they're like a lateral entry person. Then they would be counted as a teacher. I'm looking at Tracy's question. It says, do classroom teachers have to be certified? Thinking of online facilitators. If they're like a lateral entry person who's not quite certified, but they're working towards certification, then you should definitely count them as a teacher. But if they're paid as like a technology assistant or a teacher assistant and not paid as a full-time teacher, then they should not be counted as a teacher. So I hope that answers that question. And again, if you're not sure, then that's where I would go back to my principal and say, just ask them how many teachers they have, count, and go with that number. We do cross-check this with human resources, but a lot of times those numbers don't always match based on what we have at the state level. So for terms of what we use here, we just use this 104 question. I hope that answers that question. When in doubt, ask your principal or ask somebody at central office who's responsible for human resources, and they should be able to tell you that number officially. So I hope that answers those questions. Jumping into 110 and 112. Yes. So I got another question. If they're a classified employee, don't count as a teacher. That's correct. So do you have a technology fee? I do want to point this out just for folks. When you look at this particular question, we did change this last year or from last year. It's the same question, but the way you answer it is different. If you do have a technology fee, last year we just asked you to type in the technology fee. And one of the things that happened with that is the way that people wrote 50. Some people wrote 50, some people wrote 50.00, some people put the $sign in there. So lots of different ways to write 50, which made it hard for the data to validate. So we just changed this to a drop-down menu, and if you don't see your number in there, just put other, and it'll give you an opportunity to type in whatever that number is. If this was filled in last year, then it should have calculated that over for you. And I should have mentioned that at the beginning. And I'm glad that I saw this. I'm going to jump to a different school system just to show you something real quick. You will notice when you're going through yours that the answers are already there. When you're going through your section, the answers from last school year have already populated in, so that if nothing has changed, you don't have to waste your time retyping in all the answers. And so if something has changed, say for this question, maybe your technology fee went up from $20 to $25, then you could just change the questions that need to be changed. I do recommend, double counting, or double checking, making sure that the counts are correct. And then you'll notice here for 113, this question that jumps in is asking you to submit a link to your plan or describe the plan. This is one that you don't have to put in an actual live link. The next question is policy. People always ask me why. People always ask me why this is under policy, and so it's just on the way the rubric is written. The way policies is written is that you have a policy in place that supports a. I'm not sure exactly why they put it there, but under policy is where they start asking about all the media center stuff. So that's why the media center question is under this policy section. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me as to why it's labeled policy, but it's where it aligns to the rubric. But these are the questions related to the media center. Do you have a physical space? And then how many titles are included in your media collection? And please note that this asks for the word titles. It does not say how many books. It's how many titles. So if you have Harry Potter in your library and you've got 50 copies of it, that's one title. So we're not asking for physical books. We're asking for different titles because we're asking here for variation in the districts, like how many different options do kids have as opposed to, one book for every kid. That's great, but they don't have a lot of choice in what they could read. So we want to make sure that there's different titles there. And then how many are print and how many digital in terms of percentages. And then average age of your media collection. And this is one that we have validated this question so that you can't just type in like 21 to say it's 21 years old. We used to get that quite a bit. We're talking about basically the average copyright date of your books. If you have Destiny in your district or in your school, you should be able to run that report in Destiny in the back end and get the average age of your collection for the books in Destiny, and then what's the average weekly circulation. So how many books are being checked out there. Jumping into school networks. This is a question, again, where that communication between the district office and schools is going to be very, very important because you can see on my screen there's a button here that says upload. And if you're in a large district, it may be that your schools fill this out at the district level. They have a way for these four questions to upload all of them at the same time so that they can just upload a spreadsheet into the system to populate these, because we know a lot of times the folks who are filling this out at the school level don't have access to this information very easily. When I was a tech director in school districts, this was one that I always created a cheat sheet and just sent it out to the folks who typed it in individually. So instead of doing that statewide, we just provided a way for them to upload this. You can edit this information after they've uploaded, but just double check with them to make sure that they're not doing that and don't have a plan to do that, so that you're not doing more work than you have to do or changing their numbers. So just communicate. This is one where in 2000 or with 203, You notice we jumped from 201 to 203. We did delete 202 from the list last year. And then we jump into user devices. If you have been in your position for this year, you'll note that this was one of the sections we asked you to update in January and December. So this one's probably already up to date, but if you've added desktop or added any computers since January, feel free to update that here. Just while I have it on the webinar, just to make sure we're clear, 208 has caused some issues over the past. We do ask this question and specify this because of testing. We're trying to, obviously the testing requirement is that a screen is 10 inches or larger. So we're trying to determine readiness for online testing through this question. And so we ask about screen sizes here. And then we also ask about operating systems. So if you have a screen that's 10 inches or bigger, put it in the second row. If it's small screen, then, like a netbook, put it in the first row. And then we ask you questions about those. So of these, how many go home and how many are individually assigned to students? And then on this question, we're asking of the total here, of those total devices in the first two rows, how many are desktops and how many are laptops? And of those, how many are touchscreens? And so there was a question that came out towards that someone had asked specifically about some readiness across the state and being able to potentially implement initiative and from legislation and things like that. And someone asked, well, how many devices are in schools that have the ability to be touchscreens? And I didn't have that answer, so we were asked to do that survey in the middle of the year so that we could help determine readiness for an initiative on legislation and things like that. So that's why that came out, and that's why we are asking that there as well. So then we asked for a number of staff desktops and so on down the line there. Student tablets, the same questions for there. You'll notice that if you filled this out in January, we did not include a none check. And so we have added that none. If none of the grades are assigned or none of those grades have access, they're all individually assigned. You can check a none there. One of the questions is, I assume Chromebooks are considered laptops. Yes, Chromebooks are considered laptops. Anything that has a physically attached keyboard, we consider a laptop. If it's a laptop, if it is a tablet that can magnetize into a keyboard or has a case that has a keyboard on it, then that's a tablet. If it basically can close itself shut and it's permanently made that way, then we would consider that a laptop. If you've sold something as tablets and you know that it's a Windows tablet, throw it in there as the tablets. But Chromebooks we do count as laptops, yes. All right, so we have that there. Learning environments. Learning environments is the next section. We did change this from last year, so if you filled this out in the past, you'll notice that's why it's black for this school, because they have a blank, because this was changed from previous years. We asked for the total number of classrooms. Definition of a classroom is any classroom that is designated for instruction and that has students to it, assigned to it, or could potentially have students assigned to it. We know some schools have additional spaces that is a classroom, but for whatever reason, maybe they didn't have enough third graders to fill that classroom this year. But I would just make sure that this aligns to your E-rate count. So just work with your person from central office to make sure that you're counting classrooms. The lunchroom is not a classroom, even if, in terms of E-rate purposes. But the classrooms are classrooms that are designated for instruction. And then we do ask for different things in the classroom, like for projector, for interactive boards. A casting device is something like an Apple TV or a Chrome Stick or a Roku. Those are what we're considering in terms of casting devices. And then we talk about televisions and touchscreen panels. So if you just have like a big monitor attached to the wall that you connect your Chromebook to, but it's not touchscreen, then count it there. And then if it is touchscreen, count it in the other category. we pushed all of those numbers in from last year into just the regular TV box, or to the regular non-touchscreen panel. So if you do have touchscreen, you may have to decrease this number and move it over here. Question is, if we have casting and mirroring software but not a device, should it be counted in question 217? So if you're able to cast, like using Google Cast or something like that, but you're casting to a projector, then you would count that as a projector and under the computers. If you're using a actual hardware device to do the casting, then it would count it under casting device. So we know that there's ways to cast through the internet, but we're trying to get a count for that comes up quite a bit. How many folks are using Apple TVs? How many folks are using things like Chrome sticks and things like that? So that's the question there. Next question says, so a pull-out classroom is considered a classroom. If students are in that classroom where instruction is going on, then I would count that as a classroom. Yes. So yeah, I would definitely count that as a classroom if you've got students are in there as well, because that this is an E-rate question, and I know a lot of you probably don't have a lot to do with E-rate. Some of you may have it, but we do consider classrooms anywhere where instructions go, so that we could potentially put in an access point. And really the total number of classrooms is really there to determine access points per classroom, which is a school report card report. And since that's so connected to E-rate, then I would just make sure that I count them the same way that I count them for E-rate. And your central office person should be able to help you with that. So on question 217, I'm getting lots of questions on that. So what about giant panels that are touchscreen and interactive? So the way that I would go through this is, if you have a projector that projects onto a screen, then that should count as a projector. If you have a projector that projects onto like a smart board, or a projector that projects onto a Promethean board, then that would be a projector and an interactive board. If your panel does not require a projector and it has a display on it of its own, then that should be counted as a touchscreen panel, if that makes sense. So if it doesn't require an additional display system, then that's the touchscreen. The interactive boards are ones that we're talking about that require an additional display system, one that projects onto it. So the old smart boards, Prometheans, whatever other brands there might be. And then for 217A, we're asking about any type of school. One of the measurings that we have at the state level is the number of interactive classrooms. And so I would say in this particular question that I think that they probably did not answer this question correctly, because they have 20 interactive boards in this school. And so that is an interactive classroom. You've got a projector that displays onto an interactive panel. So we're talking about the opportunity to where you have kids that could come up and interact with technology at the front of the classroom or back of the classroom. So it could be a touchscreen panel. It could be an interactive board. It could even be, to be honest with you, if you've got, well, I guess that's really it. Interactive ways that they can go up and interact with. I'm trying to think of what I was thinking of. The smart tables, not necessarily a display system, but some have the old smart tables that they can drag and play with. That doesn't necessarily show up to the class, but they walk back in the back. So if they have that, then that should be included in the count there. 220 is about technicians. Again, if you've got technicians that are paid for out of central office and they come to your school like for 1 or 2 days a week, do not count them here. But we do have some schools out there in North Carolina that pay for a technician out of their school funds. And so we're trying to count those in a different way. So if you have a technician who is paid for out of school funds, count them here. If they're paid for out of district funds, count them at the district office. And then we have our technical support. system there. And then, what percentage of students in your school have internet access at home? We're hoping that this isn't just a random guess. We're hoping that you all have some system in place, whether it's a survey or another way to measure this, but we do ask for this. It is approximation. So let me go back a page here while I'm on this. So classrooms with televisions and Apple are not considered interactive. That is correct, although we may be changing that definition in future years because you could potentially touch the iPad and move the screen around. So the way the definition is currently written, that would not count, but we may be updating that definition in the future. And then what about new technologies such as augmented tables? I would count those things, like if they can interact with a touch screen of some sort that's larger than their iPad, then count those as an interactive panel or an interactive board, however you want to, or as an interactive board, I should say. At the end of the day, this is your data. And if you think it should, we have common definitions. We don't want folks counting iPads as touch, as computers versus tablets, right? So there's some common definitions on there. But for these little, like the augmented tables or the smart tables or things like that, if you all count them as an interactive panel, then count them as an interactive panel in the thing, in the DLMI. We want you to get credit for what you have. Obviously, we want it to be as accurate as possible. So, there's just no way to perfectly define technology every year. So some of these things that pop up, it's hard to put them in those categories. So, I'm fine with, if you feel like that's something that you've defined as an interactive panel, then to count that there. As long as you're, okay with that being included in your count. And however you define those in your district is okay. I would see anything that's larger than a one-person tool that they can come back and interact with as an interactive panel. If it's a display system, then I would count that as if it's hung on the wall that everybody can see, then I would count that as an interactive TV or a touchscreen TV. We talked about what percentage have internet access at home there, and then access to digital content. We talk about, do you have alternate accommodations for students who don't have internet access at home? A lot of people put no on this before they see the choices. And then when they look at the choice, if they were to open the question as yes and then put the choices there, they would probably notice that they do have answers. So if you guys have a media center that's open before and after school, that's a way that students can come in and get access to internet who don't have it at home. Do you check out hotspots? So someone asked me last year, got a few questions around these two bullets here. So local community partnership and providing central wireless internet access in the community, what is the difference? So providing central wireless internet access in the community would be something like your city has provided free Wi-Fi access on telephone poles for 3 city blocks. Local community partnership might be that you've worked out something with all the McDonald's in your area that students can come and sit in their McDonald's and access the internet. So local community partnerships would be things where folks are using their Wi-Fi in some other building to do that versus providing hubs of some kind in the community. If you put it on buses, feel free to put other. We've added it to buses, things like that. 403, we are asking, like, how do you check out ebooks? And then 404 asks about what are you using in your school? You'll notice we added NC WiseOwl, so everybody hopefully will check that that's a free learning opportunity in their school. If you paid for something beyond the free versions, then check the pay there. And then if you have things that are not listed here, that you add those underneath as well. And then the last section is learning management system. And does your school have a learning management system, and what kind do you guys use in your school? And then check that there. And those are all of the questions in terms of in the DLMI. Let's see, I have one more. Would the central wireless internet access in the community need to be within the zone of that particular school? I would think so. If your school can take advantage of that, then yes. I mean, if you know you've got students that drive out to the park to get on Wi-Fi, I mean, and they're taking advantage of it, then I would count that as a yes. That's available in my school. So those are all of the questions. Charter schools and traditional schools have the same questions for the school section. The next section is validation, and this just allows you to go back and get on one page to see, well, why is this section still black? The number of classroom touchscreens is missing. So it just shows you what's going on there. And then the last section is principal sign off. And I am hearing this morning that for some reason, when folks try to put their principal name and hit sign off, that they're getting an error message. So I am checking on that today. And also some folks are telling me that they are still seeing their principal sign off from the January update in their boxes. So if you still see the principal's name in there from January, if the principal comes in and clicks sign off again, it will update the date in our system. So I'm going to try to have those cleared out, but if it's there in the meantime, it will update the date, and so we can see that it's been updated since January on the back end. It just doesn't necessarily show up on your screen. So that's the links of the questions. The other tab that I do want to make sure that you guys see here, you will not see the same screen. I clicked on reports. My reports are very different than your reports, but this is something that a lot of folks have missed somehow in our presentations of the DLMI, and maybe I haven't spent enough time on it or whatever. But a lot of times we get asked for how can I download all of my data from the system. I want a paper copy, and so if you come under here as a school user, if you are a school level user, you should just see these school reports. If you click on export, it's going to take you to a button that says download, and you can actually go back all the way to 2015. But whenever you're ready, if you click download, it's going to download a spreadsheet, and mine has every school in the state of North Carolina. But yours, you'll see, if you notice, it has what question 101, 102, 103, and then each of the answers for your school in a spreadsheet. If you're an LEA level user, so if you have LEA access, this report will print off all of the schools in your district. If you're a school level user or charter school user, it will just print off just your school. But it's a spreadsheet that has all of your answers for the entire DLMI listed there as well. I get everyone from the state of North Carolina, but if you just want to see it on the screen or do some manipulation with it, you do have the ability to just click on each of these tabs, and it will show you basically a summary of what's been typed in. So you can scroll through and see your answers that way as well, with the number of question and then sort of a shortened version of the question there as well. And so that is the reports for each of those. It populates that. You do have the ability on each of these screens to download it by section. You also have the ability to come in if you wanted to do some calculations or make a chart. You could do that as well. That's probably more beneficial at the district level than it is at the school level, since you're only looking at one. But you do have that ability there as well. So that's the presentation in terms of, let me just go back and see if I missed any questions. What if the technology fee is optional? I think I missed that question. I would just put that as as an other, please specify and just say optional $25 fee as opposed to a hard 25 fee. Let's see, any other ones? I think I've answered all of those so far. Let me jump back into the presentation. So that's just taking a look at the DLMI. Recommendations, when you're new, if you're new, then you will want to use the user's guide when filling out the survey. Have that open if you've got two screens, or print off a copy. Oh, and that was one other thing I meant to show you in here. No, that was it. So hold on. Sorry, I'm jumping back between my LAA and my school. Yeah, so when you're at the school level, always check your validation pages. If you're an LAA user, this was what I was going to show you, but that's only good for LAA users. I should have deleted it. But if you're an LAA user, you have an extra tab that shows you school check, that allows you to see how many principals in your district have signed off, and that's what I was going to show. And I should have updated my slideshow because I keep missing this one. I missed it yesterday too. It's due June 30th every year. I just didn't update my date. And then if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I will answer them. I do a lot of DLMI stuff. In addition to that, my contact information is on here. If you're in one of these portions of the state, I've provided your regional consultant's name as well as their information here on to reach out to them. I do want to highlight the South region. This region here, if you are in the Sandhills or Southeast, Julian is currently out on leave with some medical issues. So if you need any support for this go around in the DLMI, just reach out to me, and I will get the answers that you need for the DLMI. We have some folks who are supporting those regions as well for other things. But in terms of DLMI support, if you have any questions for DLMI, just let me know, and I will either put you with the right person or answer the question myself. Let's see. Question came in: would an insurance fee be a tech fee? If you're considering it insurance, if students have to pay insurance or tech, for technology, I would include that as a fee for technology. If we have a BrightLink interactive projector, do we count it as a data projector, interactive board, or both? So if you have an interactive projector that does not have a physical board on the wall, then it's just a projector, but then you count it as an interactive classroom. So count it in your projector count, and then the interactive classroom portion, that is a touch system. So I would include that as, where that second question that talks about is that classroom interactive, then yes, that's an interactive classroom. And project should be projector. I guess that means in your question, unless I have misspelled it on the screen, which is altogether possible. Okay, yeah, so those questions were related to here. If you have like a BrightLink interactive projector, count it here. Don't count it as a board, because we're trying to figure out how many districts have projectors with boards, or how many are moving away from that with interactive projectors. So let's say you had 25 projectors in your classroom and you had 25 classrooms, and then you put 100% here, we would know that those were interactive projectors, if that makes sense. Any other questions about the DLMI? We're almost out of time here. I will go back. I don't know if we've had anybody else join since the start. I think we might have had one person come in. But for the folks that maybe weren't here right when we started, the bit.ly for today is on the screen. It has links to each of the things that we went through today. But my big thing is make sure that you're filling this out not in isolation. Work with your principal, work with your central office staff who's responsible for the DLMI, or whoever is your manager or your person that you work with at central office. If I'm a media coordinator, my media director, that type of thing. so that you are working together to make sure that you're not duplicating counts and things like that. And then use that user's guide. When I get new questions in about things, I go and update the user's guide and add things as they come in. I try to keep that as a live and interactive document. It is there for you to use, and like I said, it's updated frequently. So please go in and use that. I do need to update 2 screenshots I noticed this morning that I had not put in there yet. So um, uh, around the 200 questions, I don't know why I didn't update those in January, but I didn't. So I need to update a couple of screenshots in there, but use those things. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'll do my best to answer it as best as I can. And help you through that as well. So I'm here to help if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. This will be posted on the wiki, hopefully by this afternoon if all the recording buttons worked correctly. If you just love the sound of my little hit GradeNet voice and want to listen to it again, it'll be there for you. Or if you know there are some folks in your district who weren't able to join, you can share the link with them as well so that they can listen to it if they want to. And we'll be doing another one of these later this week. Let me look and see what day that is. I can't remember off the top of my head. I believe we are doing another one tomorrow around lunchtime, and then another LEA one tomorrow afternoon. Or excuse me, LEA is at lunchtime tomorrow, and then the school one is tomorrow at 3:30. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we will talk with you soon, and good luck filling this out, and have a great rest of the week. Thank you, guys.